Support for WUWM podcasts comes from University School of Milwaukee, fulfilling a values-based mission of developing learners, fostering leaders, and preparing citizens for pre-kindergarten through 12th grade. More information at usm.org/mission.
You're listening to Lake Effect Spotlight from WUWM, Milwaukee's NPR station. This is one of our favorite conversations from WUWM's daily talk show, Lake Effect.
The cold has returned to Milwaukee, and the water is slowly icing over once again. But if you stare out at Lake Michigan, you'll see flowing water in the not-so-distant horizon. And there's a good reason for that, as artist and educator Geo Rutherford can tell you. Rutherford is an educator and content creator based here in Wisconsin whose work focuses on bodies of water. Her TikTok, Geodosaurus, shares videos filled with facts about our waterways, including Lake Michigan. She joins Lake Effect's Joy Powers to explain what makes Lake Michigan so unique.
So one fact that became clear in looking at, the reasons why or why not Lake Michigan freezes over is Lake Michigan has never truly frozen over, at least not in recorded history. Why is that? What keeps it from freezing over?
There's so many factors that are kind of at play here. And a big one is that Lake Michigan is, okay, let's just talk about Lake Michigan. Lake Michigan is extremely deep. It's 923 feet deep, which is the second deepest of the Great Lakes. Obviously, Lake Superior is the deepest. But then the second factor is that Lake Michigan is further south. It's as far south as Lake Erie. And so Lake Michigan and Lake Erie are both heating up quite a bit in the summer. So you have this really hot, really deep body of water that stays pretty warm all the way through the winter. Like it's kind of retaining its heat through the winter. And it's only if you get really cold weather and then you don't get a ton of wind that you're going to get like that 90% frozen Lake Michigan. But then there's kind of a lot of extenuating factors as well. Like if you have bouts of cold and then the world heats up a bit and then it gets cold again and then it heats up a bit, your ice is not going to be consistently growing across the lake and forming. But the fact that it's so deep means that, you have big waves. The ice crystals aren't able to form as easily. And so they're forming in a different way on Lake Michigan than they necessarily are on Lake Erie, where Lake Erie is only 210 feet deep. It's shallow, it's warm, it cools down really quickly in the winter. And pretty much every year that you have good cold weather, you can see Lake Erie getting a lot of ice. Like Lake Erie will completely freeze over in the winters, unlike Lake Michigan.
That really gets to this question that inspired this conversation. People have been looking at Lake Michigan and going, why am I not really seeing ice? Why isn't there as much ice as we've seen in the past? What are some reasons for that?
We definitely have shifts and changes depending on what's going on with the actual winter that we're having. So I think it froze pretty significantly in 2014. It froze pretty well in 2019. And those were extremely cold winters in the Midwest, which contributed to the fact that Lake Michigan was able to freeze. But I think if you overall look at the ice on the Great Lakes, it's diminished in the last 20, 30 years. We've just generally kind of our average ice coverage across all of the Great Lakes and Lake Michigan has been decreasing. So you have to have kind of extenuating circumstances to get this full ice effect. And the dipping of the polar vortex, where that cold Arctic air comes down into the United States, and it's been hitting this area specifically pretty hard this year, which is why we've had more ice on the Great Lakes in the past. I think we're almost at 60% ice coverage in the Great Lakes, that's great. That's a lot of ice across the Great Lakes. But, in 2019, I think we peaked around 80%. So it's still not quite as much as we've seen in the past the past decade.
Sure. It seems like even when it does get ice, you can still see moving water in the distance. It's always made me question just the quality of the ice on Lake Michigan. Is this a thick layer of ice that we get when it does freeze kind of by the shore, or is it flimsy?
It's more that what's happening when the ice actually freezes is you're getting this build up in development. So first, if the water is moving quickly, you might get kind of this oily ice. I think that's actually one of the terms where it's kind of sloshy and slushy, and it's not really ice. It's just lots of ice crystals banging together. Then you get like an ice pancake where the water kind of forms these circular pools of ice that are then bumping against each other, which is why they kind of look like pancakes in the water. And then it gets a little colder and those pancakes freeze together. But then you kind of have like an inconsistent freeze. It's not like I live here on a lake in Sauk City and we have like 18 inches of solid, beautiful ice. You know what I mean? It's nice and flat. It's smooth. You could ice skate on it. And don't quote me on this, but I don't think Lake Michigan will ever freeze like that. Like, it's just not the way Lake Michigan is kind of set up because it does have pretty significant waves. It has that sloshing effect across the lake where you kind of, if you get a buildup of wind, then you'll kind of get more powerful waves on one side of the lake or the other. So that inconsistency with the wind and the waves and the depth and all of that stuff, you're never going to get like a perfectly beautiful flat ice on Lake Michigan. It's always going to be kind of this amalgamation of ice that's kind of building up on top of itself.
Interesting. I will say in preparation for this conversation, I walked down to the lake, right? I went to the lakefront over by the Milwaukee Art Museum and Discovery World, and it was frozen right by there. But looking at the ice, it was kind of funky like that. There were these kinds of, pancakes. That's very interesting terminology. And then right against the shore, it almost looked kind of broken apart.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you'll get like ice volcanoes and little ice tsunamis or ice dams. Like, there's so much fun ice terminology that the Great Lakes, we're lucky that the Great Lakes kind of has all these fun different types of ice that occur. And yeah, you're going to kind of get this buildup. The ice volcanoes are fun. That's what you'll see on the beaches. Like when you go to the Indiana Dunes State Park or you go to one of these really sandy, giant beaches, the ice is really built up. Like, people walk up onto the ice because they can't even see the water. So they're like walking up onto the ice without realizing that they're like walking above potentially like 6 or 10 feet of open air before the water because of the way that the ice is just like accumulating as it smashes against the shore and builds up. Certain areas, if you have an area that's protected from the wind and protected from waves, like in bays or in like these little inlets that we get along the Great Lakes shorelines, you're going to have a nice freeze. Like, you could potentially have a nice flat frozen pool of water there. But in most areas in the open Lake Michigan, you're not going to get that. So Green Bay freezes usually, I'm not going to say every year, but it freezes more easily. And these different pockets and corners will freeze more flat and more solid and more evenly because they're protected from that wave and wind action.
Oh, interesting. Now, that's, I think, a big question for people, especially here in the Milwaukee area where our main lake is Lake Michigan. You mentioned, of course, the lake by you is pretty frozen over. I think the lake that I grew up on, Geneva Lake, I think that's frozen over. I'm not sure.
That's a big one.
It's a big one.
Yeah. The bigger the lake, the more it's affected by wind.
Oh, sure. What are some ways of picking out a lake to really get the full ice experience, the ice capades that people are interested in?
I can't say that I'm a particularly ice person. Like, I've never been ice fishing. I ice skated when I was a kid, but I've only recently moved to this lake here in Sauk City. And it's amazing because there's people on it 24 hours a day, it feels like. There's people ice fishing. There's people using little motor cars across it. So I don't know what their system is for making sure that that's a safe practice. If that's your question, I don't really know because I'm even hesitant. My dad will walk, like, he does a lap around the entire lake and he uses the fact that it's frozen as an advantage to like cut across, and he walks across the entire lake with the dogs. And I'm like, I don't do that. I'm like nervous because there's a lot of accidents every year because people underestimate ice, and it makes me I think because of the nature of my TikTok and what I do, where I talk about spooky waters and things accidents that have happened. I'm hesitant. I'm a very hesitant person when it comes to ice. And I've seen videos this year of Lake Michigan in Milwaukee and in Chicago where people are walking across these frozen ice pancakes. And I'm like, please don't do that. Like you can't trust it. Like it's not like an inland lake where you can ask an ice fisherman if it's 18 inches deep, like thick ice, and like you can trust to walk across it. This is the Great Lakes cannot be trusted like that. They're not safe. So yeah, I feel like I'm more cautious and don't I don't do that.
Fair. So given the ice pancakes, the ice volcanoes, the many very interesting ice types that you can find on the lakes, you won't be venturing out.
No, I would never. I'm also a giant person. I'm like 6'3". I just don't trust it. Like I'm like no way. And I've just seen and heard of so many accidents. So
Sure. Well, Geo, thank you so much for joining us here on Lake Effect and sharing your work.
yeah, no, thank you so much for having me.
Geo Rutherford is an educator and content creator based here in Wisconsin. Her TikTok is called Geodosaurus, where you can check out her videos all about bodies of water, including her popular Spooky Lake series. Earlier this week on Lake Effect, WUWM environmental reporter Susan Bentz brought us a conversation about winter getting shorter, particularly in cities around the Great Lakes like Milwaukee. You can find that reporting at WUWM.com.
Want to hear more great stories about Milwaukee? Subscribe to the Lake Effect Spotlight podcast. Lake Effect is a local show and podcast all about Milwaukee. Hear it on the radio at noon, Monday through Friday on 89.7 WUWM. And subscribe to the Lake Effect Spotlight podcast to hear some of the best content from the show.